welcome to No Broken Legs. I am your host, Evan Belfiore. Joining me to talk a little NFC football is Jimmy Champ. Jimmy, how are you on this Wednesday night?
Man, I'm doing great, bro. We wrapped up the AFC West, and now we're going to talk about the jobber division in the NFL, and that's okay. Jobbers matter too, man.
That's right. You can check out that podcast. We will have a link to it in the description. But before you check out that video, hear what we have to say about the AFC East, because this probably isn't going to be a very long podcast because we tend to not talk very long about teams we don't necessarily like watching play. Jimmy, if we would have done this podcast a week ago, I had the Dallas Cowboys as an over, and that was at 10.5. And my thinking was they won 12 games last year. Dak missed time and was mediocre when he came back. Like, I don't see them dropping that many games in this week of a division, and then they just lost their left tackle, and now I'm taking the under. Am I overreacting to the Tyron Smith injury?
No, I don't think so. I was taking the under before the injury, so I don't think they're overreacting at all.
That's great. Okay, well, the over-under for the Dallas Cowboys, the under is 10.5. That's minus 145. This is another split one. The over is at 10, and that is even money. Dallas doesn't really know what to make of this either. The books don't really know what to make of this either, apparently. To win the division, they're plus 150, so that number's holding firm. To win the conference, they're plus 1,000. To win the Super Bowl, they're plus 2,200. To make the playoffs, yes is minus 200. No is plus 210. Jimmy, you're taking the under, so you don't like any of these bets. Why did you have them under even before Smith got hurt?
Well, for me, when I looked at their schedule, I felt in their first 6 games, they only played 2 teams where they were either more talented or had the better coach. Like, I think they lose to the Bucs, they lose to the Bengals, they lose to the Rams, they lose to the Eagles. Then they have a couple games they can win, and I think they lose to the Packers and the Vikings. They're going to lose to the Titans as well. They have a stretch where they can win some games. I just don't like the roster construction right now. I don't think they've added enough pieces. I think because of the contract, they still want to run Zeke instead of just turning it over to Tony Pollard, which is a big mistake. I don't think they've done enough in the wide receiver room. I think CeeDee Lamb is as good as can be, but with what they have next to him, you can probably just put a safety over top of him all the time, and I don't know how that goes. And for me, it's always just going to come down to the clear limit of the success of the team because of Mike McCarthy. Like, I think that matters, but I just think what they lost before the injuries mattered, and the injuries make it so much worse. I do think they have a solid defense, but I don't think they have a defense that's just going to stop teams from scoring points, and I'm not sure how many points I believe this team can score this year.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and the reason I had them over is because they do have a lot of those tough games like you mentioned, but this team doesn't really go 3 or 4 weeks without playing bad teams. Yeah, they get those 2 tough games to start. Then they're at the Giants and they're home for Washington. And then they get, 2 tough games, and then you get Detroit and Chicago. And then you get the bye. And then 2 tough games, and then you get the Giants again. Then you get Houston 2 weeks later. The books are down on Tennessee this year. They get them in week 17 before they finish the season with Washington. I guess I just see their offensive numbers get worse, and there's just no way they can get so many turnovers on defense. I mean, I know they're good over there, Jimmy, but they're not going to create that many turnovers, that many points off of turnovers, and just I'm not always a regress to the mean gambler. Like, I don't always look at that as a big thing, but when you have such an outlier, it's only natural to think that number is going to come snapping back. Now, if it doesn't, then this team's easily going to go over 10 wins.
Yeah, but I agree with you. That number comes back. So a lot of the short fields you were playing on are gone. And I don't think this offense is good enough without Smith to sustain long drives.
Yeah, man, are they just going to be that fucking stubborn with Zeke and Pollard? I
Yes,
just Mike McCarthy, like you know, does Mike McCarthy know Sean Payton's gonna probably have his job next year?
I don't think Mike McCarthy knows anything. So
He could always win games though. He won a lot of games in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Dak's not to that level, but if Dak gets a Sean Payton type coach, does this Dallas team become like a real contender in an NFC that's fairly weak?
yes,
Yeah, I agree with that too. I really like Sean Payton as a coach. I think he's just
yeah,
really
I think
good. And would, we'll just play the quick what if since I brought up Sean Payton. If this Miami team had Sean Payton as their head coach and Tom Brady as their quarterback, like I probably think that they're right there with Buffalo and Kansas City in the AFC.
yeah, 100%. And I think the difference between Sean Payton and Mike McCarthy is if Sean Payton ends up as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, you are going to see such an influx of free agents taking pay cuts to play there.
Yeah, I think he'll also find the ways to challenge Dak that Mike McCarthy just doesn't.
Nope.
And I think he'll get the best out of Dak, and I think that'll be a really positive relationship because he's just so good with his quarterbacks, and Dak seems like he's just as cerebral as Sean Payton is, and that would just work. And I think Dak's pretty good to begin with, but I just there's too many red flags for me to stick with my over bet with the injuries that they've sustained. The team that is the primary beneficiary of these injuries are the Philadelphia Eagles that are also plus 150 to win the division. Their over under sits at 9.5. The over is minus 130. The under is plus 135. Plus 150 to win the division, as I said, plus 1100 to win the conference, plus 2500 to win the Super Bowl. To make the playoffs, yes, minus 160, no, plus 158. Jimmy, do you have the Eagles winning more or less than 9.5 games?
I'm taking the over here. I actually have the Eagles projected out at 12 wins.
Ooh. I have them at the over. I had them at the over even before I changed my mind on Dallas. I'm actually not. It's weird. I'm not changing any of my picks except for Dallas, so it didn't really affect the other
Yeah.
things I looked at in the division. I'm still not a big Jalen Hurts fan, but if they're going to run the ball more with Jalen Hurts and limit the throws that he has to make, I think this team will easily go over. They've got a lot of winnable games against the NFC North and the AFC South.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely like, I think I'm higher on Jalen Hurts than you are. He's looked good, and what we've seen him in camp, 7-on-7s, preseason, when he's played, he's stayed in the pocket a little bit more, made good throws. And I think probably almost as much as adding Devontae Adams, adding AJ Brown was such an addition for this team. I think adding AJ Brown to Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert gives Jalen Hurts all the weapons they could need in a passing game, and they've got like four really good running backs that I think they'll cycle through. I think this offense is going to be good, and I really like the defense as well.
They're also a team to look at in the same vein as the Cincinnati Bengals when you look at their schedule. There's a lot of winnable games, man. A
Yeah,
lot of
oh,
winnable
I completely,
games.
yeah,
And they end the season. Where's the. Oh, first of all, I'm looking at their schedule and I can't even find a stretch where I go, ugh, man, couple tough games in a row there. Like it just doesn't exist. Their last 5 games are they get the Giants twice, the Bears. We'll talk about the Saints in the next couple pods. And they get this Dallas team that I think at worst they're going to split with. And they may find a way to take both of those.
yeah. I mean, I have them losing back-to-back games with the Colts, Packers, and the Cowboys, Saints, and that's the only places where I have them losing multiple games in a row.
Yeah, you see after that Green Bay game, they're playing Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to be pretty good, but I actually think Philadelphia is going to beat them in that game.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts on the Eagles before we move on? Do you have them as the division winner now?
Yes, I have the Eagles winning the division. with their 12 wins. I think the Eagles, I think their roster is set up right now to just plain and simple be the best team in the NFC East for a couple of years, unless Dallas changes out head coaches, and then you'll have that back. But I think the Eagles are back right now. I think Jalen Hurts is going to take a big step forward this year. We'll see if I'm right or not. But if Jalen Hurts is able to improve his accuracy and his passing game a little bit, this Eagles team, in my opinion, is really, really good.
I agree about Philadelphia. I like all those bets. I don't think any of the other teams in this division are as good as they are. I think Dallas overall might be better, but I think Philadelphia is going to edge them out. They seem to have a little bit better. Again, it's the Tyron Smith.
Yeah.
It just that injury looms over in a division where things are so close. Losing a left tackle matters. We saw when Jedrick Wills was poor last year, Baker gets antsy. He gets antsy back there. Bad things happen.
Yep.
Speaking of quarterbacks that get antsy and leading to bad things, the Washington Armada have Carson Wentz as their quarterback, Jimmy. The sports books are spread between 7.5 and 8.5 games for this team on the over-under. You can just shop around with some of the bigger sports books. You can find your bet of choice. To win the division, they're plus 600, plus 4,000 to win the conference, plus 8,500 to win the Super Bowl. To make the playoffs, no is minus 185. Yes is plus 185. Jimmy, I'm just going to throw it out there to you at 8, although you can take either of these bets based on your preference. Where do the Commanders wind up?
Yeah. So I found a spot where the under was paying plus 105 on 7.5. So I took that bet on the under. I only project this team at 4 wins. I don't know where the hell people think they're getting 8 wins. I think even in a bad division, they're going to lose a lot of games. I don't think good Carson Wentz is going to show up very often. I think it's going to be a rough year for the Armada. Chase Young's dealing with some stuff. I do feel really bad. Rookie running back from Alabama, Brian Robinson, looked like he was taking Antonio Gibson's job as the starting running back, and then he was an unfortunate victim of a carjacking. So that's just really rough for that young man and for the team to see that kind of happen for them, something they were planning on going forward with. I love their wide receiver room. I just don't think they have a quarterback that can make anything out of it. I think this team is bad. I think they're going to lose a lot of football games.
I think. I'm taking the over.
Wow.
I hate this line. Well, here's do not make this. Do not bet on Carson Wentz. Listeners, listen to me. I am telling you what pick I would make right now, but do not bet on Carson Wentz because I'm not making this bet because I'm not betting on Carson Wentz. But for them to win 8 games, I have them at 7.5. Or I got the line at 7.5. You can get that. He can get to 8 wins without winning any important games. They have the NFC North and the AFC South. They've got a ton of winnable games in there. I think they get to 8 or 9 wins, maybe. Maybe they get to 9, but it's Carson Wentz. So he can get you to the over, but maybe it's just wish fulfillment here, Jimmy. I really want Washington to be competing for playoff games late in the season so I can bet against Carson Wentz. I guess that's what I'm really trying to say here.
I like it. I would love that because we know that comes down to easy money. The only teams I think they're going to beat the Lions, beat the Bears, beat the Falcons, and win one game against the Giants. To me, those are the only winnable games. I think this team is really bad. And it's just because I don't think Carson Wentz is going to play well. He hasn't played well for any stretch of time in a couple of years. I think it's going to look bad. I really do. And if now good Carson Wentz shows up, they actually do have some weapons where they could be successful. But it would be nice if they were in a playoff race there in like the last 3 or 4 weeks because we could really make some money.
Yeah, they have that weird thing that Cleveland and Baltimore had last year with the Giants. They play in New York before their bye, and then they play at home against New York after. So those 2 games with the Giants, with Atlanta and Houston, they're going 4-0 in that stretch, man. There's going to be Carson Wentz talk going into San Francisco. and that defense is going to end that talk. That's what I want to see. Really want to bet against Carson Wentz in that Week 16 game against San Francisco.
Yeah, you kind of hope they're still hanging around, because then we can bet them to lose against the Browns and the Cowboys in the last 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, because you do not bet on Carson Wentz to win any important game. He just seems, I don't know, man. What the fuck happened when he played in that game against Jacksonville? You called it. I remember I was just like, there's no way he can fuck it up that bad. And then he did. He fucked it up that bad.
I told you.
You were right. I underestimated the shittiness of Carson Wentz. I mean, you were all over it, man. Any final thoughts on this division?
Well, we still have a team to talk about, bro.
No, we don't. The New York Giants stink.
We do. No, we got to talk about it, man.
You can tell which team I don't like. Their over-under sits at 7. To win the division, they're plus 800, plus 6,000 for the conference, plus 13,000 for the Super Bowl, minus 260 no to make the playoffs, plus 245 yes to make the playoffs. Jimmy, are you really going to tell me that the New York Giants are going to win more than 7 games?
No, I project them at 4 wins.
Yeah, they stink. We're going to find out how much of, we talked about Brian Daboll when we talked about Buffalo. I think we're going to find out how much of the Buffalo success was Josh Allen and how much of it was Brian Daboll. And I think I said in the pod, I think a lot of it was Josh Allen. Jimmy, you agreed with me. How do you think this first season goes for him?
I think it's going to be rough, because I don't think Daniel Jones is the guy, but they've declined the 5th-year option. So this is definitely a prove it year for Daniel Jones. Now, if Brian Daboll can get something out of Daniel Jones, then maybe the first year goes okay, because their schedule is not that hard. I just think they're a really bad team. Like, they could get to 8 wins, maybe even 9, but I just think they're going to lose a lot of close games because of Daniel Jones. And I think Brian Daboll is going to find out this is harder than he thinks. Like, he's had the pleasure of being an offensive coordinator for really good head coaches, and I think he's going to find out that it's a little bit harder to be a head coach than maybe he thought, when you don't have the rosters he's had before. Like, I mean, Saquon looks healthy. I love that they signed Matt Breida as a backup to him. I think that's a great running tandem. Kenny Golladay should be arrested for theft, because this dude is putting up 0 effort on the contract he signed. If Kadarius Toney is healthy, he could be an absolute monster. I just think this team stinks. I think they're bad because of Daniel Jones and a first-year head coach. There's not a lot to like on the defensive side of the ball, and it's just one of the reasons why this division is the shits.
Remember when their former GM, Dave Gettleman, when he took Saquon Barkley, mocked the analytics people that said you don't need to take running backs early in drafts, and he pretended to type on a keyboard? That's why he doesn't really have a job anymore. And that's not a shot at Saquon Barkley, who's just had some bad injury luck. I think he's a really good player. But the opportunity cost of taking a running back that high, and it just shows an older way of thinking that just doesn't win in the NFL anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the amount of games that Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey have missed, there were probably other players you could have drafted in that spot that would be more effective, that have been on the field much more than the 2 guys they drafted at those running back spots. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And that's, for all the dumbass things Gettleman did, that I agree with you. That is probably the reason he cannot get employment, because you didn't realize the value of that draft pick. And you obviously aren't paying attention to NFL culture, where there are 3rd and 4th round running backs all over the NFL tearing things up. Like, now there are guys like Najee Harris, and if you can draft in the middle to the end of the 1st round, you're getting
Nick
a steal.
Chubb. I was perfectly fine with where they took Nick Chubb.
Yeah, but I don't think.
But you got to swing. You got to take swings in the top 10.
Yeah.
Like, you just have to, unless you're getting somebody. I mean, yeah, there's guys like Joe Thomas out there, but there's only so many of those guys out there. The top 10's it's a lotto ticket. You got to swing for the fences, Because if you hit, you can change the course of your franchise.
Yep.
All right, I don't want to talk about the NFC East anymore. I
Yeah, no,
think
that's fine.
the I think the Eagles win it. You think the Eagles win it. We think the Cowboys fall flat on their face, which will definitely delight me. I'm sure it'll delight you and most of our listeners because, just fuck them Cowboys. Jimmy, thanks for joining me to talk about this woeful division. We'll get to have more fun talking about some of these other divisions as we continue the NFC tour.
Even when we're talking about the NFC East, there's no place I'd rather be, brother.
And I want to thank all of you for listening. You can catch our previous podcast on the screen here somewhere. I'll put it up. For Jimmy Champ, I am Evan Belfiore, and we are No Broken Legs.